Welcome back to the channel. This will be the team selection for Gameweek 3 in Fantasy Premier League. I only have one free transfer and plenty of injury updates to discuss, which I've also covered in my recent podcasts, like the best wildcard team and the transfer tips. In FPL Challenge, I scored 17 points, but the upcoming challenge will be called the Shield. So any players who score defensive contribution points will score 10 points for that sort of metric, and that's why Tarkowski is in my defence, with Robert Sanchez in goal and two midfielders of Bruno Fernandes, who's currently my captain. He scored DEFCON points against Fulham in Game Week 2. Ismaila Sarr, who has a brilliant record against Aston Villa, with 5 goals and 2 assists in 3 matches last season. Erling Haaland and Chris Wood complete this team, and I will be talking about this in my deadline stream on Saturday, and I'll be starting around 9 AM in the UK, so be sure to tune in for that and all my FPL content. There will be a predicted lineups podcast and a best free hit squad based on your feedback in my recent videos. And be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and also hit the notification bell so you're always up to date with my content for FPL and UCL Fantasy, which will return very soon. Our aim will be to get to over 200 likes, by the way, and also to get to 35,000 subscribers. We recently hit 34,000, but we're still growing in numbers, and it's all thanks to your support. Check all the links in the description for my Patreon and the championships, further links to my videos, amongst many other perks, Discord server, FPL and FPL Challenge leagues, as well as Spotify can also be found in the description. The league code for FPL Challenge is HWWQV4, and for FPL, it's WFF0U7. Without further ado, let's jump straight into it. Game Week 2 is quite mixed bag overall, and I'll provide a review in this section before moving on to the prices, my transfer plans, and also the expected points. But between the sticks, I went for Robert Sanchez instead of Dubravka, so I missed out on 3 points based on my goalkeeper selection. Burnley kept a clean sheet in that 2-0 win over Sunderland, and I did predict a 0-0, so I think based on my own scoreline predictions, it made a lot more sense to go for Dubravka, and West Ham scored a brilliant opening goal by Lucas Paqueta, but Chelsea ended up winning 5-1 in the end on Friday night, and of course it culminated on Monday between Newcastle and Liverpool. Now in my defensive line, I had Gabriel, who was my transfer in to replace Frimpong, who is injured until after the international break, but it was Jurriën Timber who stole the show with a 24-pointer, getting a brace and an assist, whilst Gabriel just kept a clean sheet. He was solid as ever, but didn't get those goals from set pieces I was quite looking for. Murillo has been very disappointing so far this season with only 1 point. He was booked towards the end of that 1-1 draw against Crystal Palace, and Reinildo Mandava got defensive contribution points despite that 2-0 defeat against Burnley. And Pedro Porro was subbed on because Cole Palmer missed out on Friday night in the warm-up. He picked up an injury, so I got 5 points from the bench. A bit fortuitous, but nothing kind of groundbreaking or earth-shattering in my opinion. But Spurs kept a clean sheet away to the Etihad, and ultimately Van der Ven has offered better value so far this season compared to Pedro Porro, with an extra point and also saving you $1 million in the process. But I still think over the course of the season, Porro will justify that $5.5 million price tag. Now in the midfield, it was also quite mixed bag, but the star of the show was undoubtedly Cody Gakpo, who got a brace of assists against Newcastle, so 10 points overall, getting 2 bonus points. Only Ekitike bettered him in that regard. Reinders blanked, and this was something I talked about in the Game Week 2 Transfer Tips podcast last week. I felt that the best time to buy him was in Game Week 3. After a great performance against Wolves, of course, people flocked towards him. He was the most transferred in player, and he did disappoint. Mohamed Salah salvaged an assist late on, but I didn't want that to happen because he was my vice, and ultimately he should have been my captain. But it's nothing really that kind of groundbreaking as well, because ultimately, despite getting a captaincy blank up front, Salah only got you 3 additional points, assuming you've got Salah and this player in question. But Ndiaye got a much needed goal against Brighton, and he just loves scoring against the Seagulls. He scored the first ever goal at Everton's new stadium, the Hill Dickinson Stadium, a very weird name I think, and of course he scored the last goal at Goodison Park as well. But in the forward line, João Pedro was the star with 15 points courtesy of a goal and 2 assists. But I captained Ollie Watkins. His record against Brentford is phenomenal, but he wasn't able to haunt the Bees one more time. And after Brentford's performance in Game Week 1 against Nottingham Forest, I was very bullish on the Watkins captaincy, and I ranked him very highly in my top 10 captaincy list. But he has disappointed me more often than not in Fantasy Premier League, especially when it comes to captaining him or needing him to do something. And Brentford were very solid. That victory against Aston Villa was very crucial, and they went on to win in the Carabao Cup by a 2-0 scoreline against Bournemouth. On my bench, I had Dubravka, the only slight regret of mine, and of course Cole Palmer was subbed off automatically for Pedro Porro. Mark Guiu made a cameo in Game Week 2 and he went on to score in the Carabao Cup as Sunderland lost on penalties to Huddersfield Town. And my last player was Ezri Konsa, who is now back from suspension. He missed Game Week 2, but he might even enter my plans for the starting 11 for the upcoming deadline. So in the end, it was a green arrow, and the likes of Cody Gakpo and Ndai were crucial to achieving that. And not having Joao Pedro would have been very costly for me, but just getting the captaincy wrong there obviously was a bit frustrating. But I was always looking at Mohamed Salah, Palmer, and Ollie Watkins, and in the end, Salah got an assist, but only 5 points against Newcastle in a thrilling 3-2 victory for Liverpool, and Cole Palmer missed out. And I think I was a bit lucky there because in the previous team selection, he was my captain, but I just had a bad feeling about him for some reason, not because of the injury, but I think if he played against West Ham, he would have gone absolutely riot with a double-digit haul, and I think those that went there would have been heavily rewarded in the process. So it was 62 points, but let's discuss the prices. There was one significant change overnight. Cody Gakpo has gone up to 7.6 million and his ownership is now in the double-digit region, and obviously that isn't really something I want to see, but ultimately when you pick some decent FPL assets, their ownership is going to shoot up. The same goes for Rangers, of course, who is now 5.7 million after all the transfer activity heading into Game Week 2. Robert Sanchez remains the same at 5 million, and Gabriel, despite not doing anything special so far, costs 6.1 million in that Arsenal defence. Murillo costs 5.5, but I wouldn't be surprised if he does go down to 5.4 at some stage. Reinildo Mandava is 4 million, Pedro Porro is 5.5, and Mohamed Salah remains at 14.5 million at this moment in time. But Cole Palmer could go down in price in the next couple of days. He is currently 10.5 million. Ndai is 6.5, but I think that goal against Wolves could save him for a little while longer. Joao Pedro has gone up though to 7.6 million, and Ollie Watkins is 9, but he's another one who could fall in price very soon. Use websites like livefpl.net. They have great algorithms for predicting price changes, and that's how I was able to see that Joao Pedro and Gakpo were going to rise in the last couple of days. Dubravka is 4 million, but even if he doesn't get too many returns this season, the fact that he's a 4 million starting goalkeeper will mean he will inevitably go up in price at some stage this season. Mark Guiu is 4.5 million, and that could go down to 4.4 million if he doesn't knock on the door against Isidore and also Mayenda to start up front for Sunderland. And Ezri Konsa is 4.5 million. He was price locked, and there is no sort of possibility, I think, of him going down for the next couple of days. It was all explained by the website livefpl.net in a tweet of theirs as well, and I think Konsa might still be the best at that price point for the next 5 or 6 game weeks as Aston Villa are top of the FDR. But let's discuss some possible transfers, and one of them would just be for free, a simple Cole Palmer replacement going to Bruno Fernandes, who was very disappointing, of course, against Fulham, missing that penalty, but he can get those defensive contribution points, the goals and assists from open play, and multiple set pieces. So I think Bruno Fernandes is still a good FPL option, but some people would argue he's playing in an even deeper position this season. But I still think he did that in the last campaign. He just was able to get a lot of goal contributions towards the end, and I think that United attack needs to gel so far. And with Sesko coming in, I think that could also help the likes of Mbumo and Mateus Cunha, and of course Amad Diallo as the right wing back. But as discussed in the video yesterday for the transfer tips and also the wildcard, I talked about the injury update for Cole Palmer, and Simon Phillips reported that he had a scan on his groin on the 26th of August and the results are positive, better than he first feared. Nothing serious or too bad showing up, but Chelsea and Cole Palmer will be cautious and Fulham might come too soon. We'll see. And if there are any other updates on Palmer and other key FPL assets, they will be provided on this channel. But this is not the only player I'm looking at to replace Cole Palmer, because Mohamed Kudus could give me extra funds in the bank and I could use that to upgrade Mark Guiu to another forward, and that's something that is really piquing my interest. Antoine Semenyo is yet another one who could also fit the bill. I would have 0.1 million to buy Semenyo, and then my desired forward of choice to replace the 4.5 million striker Mark Guiu, and that is with the current prices on Wednesday the 27th of August. And what that could lead to is buying the informed Chris Wood at 7.7 million. He scored a brace against Brentford at least, and he might have blanked against Crystal Palace in Game Week 2, but against West Ham, I think Chris Wood might be a prime candidate for the captaincy, and I did discuss the top 10 captaincy options in the best wildcard team video yesterday. You'll see the definitive list, of course, in the deadline stream on Saturday, but I think Guiu to Chris Wood is just a massive upgrade, and I don't mind selling Cole Palmer to a cheaper option with Bukayo Saka also injured for the next 4 to 6 weeks, and he will miss so many crucial games for the Gunners, and there are other players where that came about. I've got Mohamed Salah already in my setup, but I'm quite eager and open to going to a cheaper midfielder than Bruno Fernandes. I think Kudus and Semenyo could offer better value at this moment in time, but this is my provisional team selection for Game Week 3, and between the sticks, there is no change despite that blank against West Ham. Robert Sanchez will now feature in the local derby against Fulham. That won't be an easy game, but Chelsea do get a lot of tight wins and a lot of draws against Fulham, a lot of low-scoring affairs, and this could be yet another one at Stamford Bridge, so I don't think Robert Sanchez is too shabby. Pedro Porro, Murillo and Konsa is a decent defensive line, although it's nothing spectacular. Reinae Nuri is currently injured and he could miss the next couple of weeks. Frimpong, of course, is facing Arsenal and he's going to miss the next couple of weeks as well due to injury. So I think any Arsenal or Liverpool defender, whilst they could return because of the capabilities of those players, I still think the fixture is enough to put you off. And then you're looking elsewhere. Mark Cucurella might be the standout in that local derby against Fulham, but I still think the Whites could cause some problems there for the Blues, and it's not really a guaranteed clean sheet. Ezri Konsa facing Crystal Palace, a bogey team of the Villains last season. It's not exactly ideal, but I still think Villa have looked decent defensively so far this season. Their main issues have been offensively and really clicking in that attack, with no goals scored in the Premier League thus far. And Murillo has been a massive disappointment, but facing a struggling West Ham side who lost 3-2 in the Carabao Cup against Wolves after being in the lead, I think that defence is one to target, and whilst Bowen and Paqueta have a great combination and they can score goals from anywhere, I still think that Forest defence could keep them out, and Murillo is worth keeping for at least one more week. Then he could be reassessed and a move to Daniel Munoz could be on the cards. But Pedro Porro, as good as he has been so far, with 11 points from 2 game weeks, he is facing Bournemouth up next, and that typically is a high-scoring affair between the Cherries and the Lily Whites, but you would back Tottenham Hotspur with the current form to get the victory, and if there was a clean sheet in that match, I think Spurs would be a little bit more likely. In the midfield, I'm going for 5 players at the moment, with Salah and Gakpo to double up on that Liverpool attack against Arsenal, which isn't great on paper, but Salah has a brilliant record against the Big Six. Rangers is away to Brighton, and I still think he has a lot of value to offer in Fantasy Premier League. And Bruno Fernandes could be a direct replacement for Cole Palmer, but it isn't set in stone, and I'm still considering a Kudus or Semenyo in this position, and then using those funds to buy Chris Wood up front for a -4. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below, and then Dye would complete this midfield facing Wolves away, and I still think they can be targeted from a defensive perspective. Now, Joao Pedro and Watkins are solid options up front, and I still think Watkins will come good, but if you do have Rodgers and Watkins to double up on Aston Villa offensively, you might want to consider trimming that down to 1, and I'd rather sell Morgan Rodgers at this moment in time, which I discussed in the recent Transtips podcast, and Joao Pedro is clearly a hold for now. He was quite poor against Crystal Palace on his Premier League debut for Chelsea, but he did really well against West Ham, and I think he could be the star of the show, and he might even be on penalties in the potential absence of Cole Palmer. Now on my bench, I've got Dubravka facing Man United away, and also Renilo Mandava. You could definitely put Gabriel ahead of him in the pecking order, but I think Liverpool will score against Arsenal, and I've also got some interesting scoreline predictions, of course, which I'll show you in the Predicted Lineups podcast and also the deadline stream very soon. Mark Guiu is last on my bench despite scoring in midweek in the Carabao Cup. I just don't really see him being a part of my main starting 11 anytime soon, and he still might be transferred out for Chris Wood, who is one of the standouts up front facing West Ham at home, and he has a decent record against the Hammers throughout his career. But at the moment, I'm looking to captain Mohamed Salah facing Arsenal at home. He has a great record against the Gunners and all Big Six clubs, and he's always able to churn out these goal contributions even when he's not playing well. Bruno Fernandes would be the vice in this situation, but if I were to bring in Kudus or Semenyo in the midfield and Chris Wood up front, I'd really consider captaining Chris Wood this week against that struggling West Ham side. It would be for a -4 hit, but it might be worth it in a week like this where West Ham are basically a team to target so far this season. So those are my current plans for the team selection, and it really comes down to that. A free transfer to buy in a Man United attacker like Bruno Fernandes, Cunha, or even Brian Mbeumo, or going for that -4 hit route and going really aggressive. Now, with the expected points, these are taken by the website Fantasy Football Hub. Robert Sanchez has 4.1 compared to Dubravka's 3.2. In my defensive line, I've got Pedro Porro, who has 4.6. Murillo is identical at 4.7, and Consus is significantly lower at 3.6, which is the exact same as Renildo Mandava, a 4 million defender who's on my bench. Mohamed Salah is still top with 7.4, Gakpo has 5.4, and Reinders is quite low at only 4.1, and Bruno Fernandes is the second highest of my 15-man squad with 6.5, and Ndai has risen to 4.6. In my forward line, Joao Pedro has 5.3, and Watkins has 5.8. Mark Guiu, who is last on my bench, has 0.5, and Gabriel, who's in the middle of that bench, he has 3.4 expected points despite facing Liverpool away. He has scored at Anfield before. The same goes for every single Big Six stadium, with the exception of Old Trafford, but he has scored against Man United in home matches. I think this is a competent 15-man squad, and it would be for a free transfer, but that -4 hit is becoming even more tempting. There are multiple resources on websites in Fantasy Premier League, and one of them is called FPL.team, where you can visualize future game weeks and compare chip strategies and transfer plans. So with the -4 hit, bringing in Kudus and Chris Wood, I would have this starting 11 of Robert Sanchez, Murillo, Konsa and Pedro Porro, Salah, Gakpo, and probably Kudus if I had to pick between him and Antoine Semenyo, especially with Game Week 3 in mind, where I think Tottenham Hotspur would have the edge. Ndai would complete the midfield, but Reinders would be on the bench as Chris Wood comes into the starting 11 with Watkins and Joao Pedro, and the other players who make up my 15-man squad include Dubravka, Renildo Mandava, and Gabriel, who would be third on my bench with these proposed transfers. The expected points, according to FPL.team, is 55.5, and I would have roughly 0.7 million left in the bank after taking a -4 hit. But the alternative, of course, is what I discussed throughout this video, buying Bruno Fernandes as part of a free transfer. It gives me 1.5 million in the bank, and the expected points is 56.4, but we want actual points, not predicted points and all this stuff, XP, YE. Yeah, I think we should also be a bit careful about that. I like bringing all these stats into it to give the full picture and then offer my observations, but I think ultimately sometimes you've got to back your gut feeling, and I think that -4 hit is becoming more tempting by the minute. My current plan is the Bruno Fernandes route. You will see my final squad in the deadline stream, and it will come down to that sort of decision, but I'm quite bullish on those United attackers for Game Week 3 anyway against Burnley at home, but not so much in the long term, and I think they need to click in that offensive line. So that's where Kudus or Semenyo could come into play, and sometimes when you've got an opportunity like Chris Wood facing a struggling West Ham side at home, you've got to take that opportunity and pounce on it. But we've only had 2 game weeks worth of data, and in some cases some Carabao Cup matches, of course, for those teams involved in midweek, and that gives you a little bit more information, but it's still not enough. And a lot of us would have thought Sunderland are going to have a great season after their 3-0 win against West Ham, but then when you see Chelsea batter the Hammers the way they did on Friday night, you just think maybe West Ham are that bad rather than Sunderland being that impressive. So that's why we need to be careful, and we can always offer our opinions. That's what football in FPL is all about, but we need to temper our expectations and also try to analyze things with more information and data over the coming weeks, and that's where the wildcards will become stronger with every single edition of that particular video. And of course, keep your eyes peeled for the best free hit squad, focusing specifically on Game Week 3. As you'll see on Saturday, my team weakness that I want to highlight is with West Ham, who have conceded 8 goals in the Premier League so far this season, followed by 3 in midweek in that 3-2 defeat against Wolves, of course, and they concede so many chances in central areas, which is a common theme amongst a lot of these clubs. But when you look at Chris Wood's shot map and also the chances and shots that West Ham are conceding, there is a nice little link there. So the blue circles indicate the shots conceded by West Ham, and that heat map is Chris Wood's shot map, if you want to call it that way. And I think there is a nice alignment there when you look at the positions he occupies and where West Ham most struggle inside that penalty area. So I think Chris Wood is almost destined to do well, but I also thought the same about Ollie Watkins last week, and I did get it wrong on that count. But Game Week 1, my highlighted player and also team weakness was with Bournemouth, and I did highlight Cody Gakpo as one of my favourite players for the opener. And whilst he didn't do anything spectacular or crazy, it was still a decent return by him, and he has turned out to be one of the best options for Liverpool so far this season, even over Florian Wirtz, who might become a sell for some people very soon, but it is quite difficult to do that with Burnley away on the horizon. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below as always, and it might surprise you that if I captain Bruno Fernandes in FPL.team anyway, the expected points does rise to 57.5, which is significantly higher than the Chris Wood and either Kudus or Semenyo route in the midfield as part of a -4 hit. But on Saturday, I'll lock in my final team during that deadline stream. The same goes for FPL Challenge, and I like to wait for press conferences when possible and with all the midweek games completed. So in this case, it's the Carabao Cup, and in the future, we'll have the Champions League, Conference League and the Europa League. And sometimes when you make an early transfer, like some people did with Anthony Gordon, that could backfire massively. I provided an update, of course, in my wildcard video about what we should do with Gordon and obviously what happened on Monday night, which is kind of obvious, but I think it was worth mentioning after suggesting him as a purchase, and I went a little bit early on that one as well. Thank you very much for watching this video and listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it or found it insightful, then like this video, subscribe to my channel, and also hit that notification bell so you're always up to date with my content, whether it's for FPL or UCL Fantasy. Keep your eyes peeled for the return of the Champions League. Follow me on X, Instagram, and Blue Sky for the latest updates on those two fantasy formats, and check all the links in the description for my Patreon and the Championships. You can click the join button on YouTube and go to patreon.com/FPL Dylan for early access to my videos and priority reply to comments. Check the Discord server, FPL and FPL Challenge Leagues, as well as Spotify, and leave a 5-star review. It goes a long way to boosting us up even further. I'll see you very soon on Saturday for that deadline stream, and in the meantime, there'll be a predicted lineups podcast and a best free hit team video.